Hey everybody, welcome back to Furniture Flipping Teacher. I'm Lauren, and I paid way too much for this furniture set, but we're gonna flip it anyway. So when I originally picked up this set, I had full intentions to actually keep it for our own home and in our own bedroom. But then when I came across the other set that we currently have, I had to switch them out because I just loved that set so much more. With that being said, since it was originally gonna be for ourselves, I was okay with paying up for it just a little bit since the profit wasn't the goal for this flip, but now that is the goal. So I paid $295 for these two mid-century modern dressers. So we're gonna see if we can still make a profit, even though I'm already in probably what I would usually be in at this point at the end of the flip, or even more than that. So we've got our work cut out for us. However, these dressers are in pretty nice shape and I have some really awesome plans for these. But first things first, as always, time to remove the hardware. I'm gonna be replacing the hardware on this with the same hardware, like reusing this. So I just like to keep it in a container so I can clean it later and then reinstall it without losing any of the pieces. All right, now that I've got all the hardware off, the drawers are out, it's time for cleaning. So sometimes I'll take the drawers out and it's just really much easier for me to get inside of the dressers because that is an important part to clean as well. But as you can see, I've got my work cut out for me. We've got, I believe, 15 drawers, well, maybe 14 drawers that I've got to go ahead and clean. So I'm going to be using my Simple Green here in the spray bottle and then some lint-free cloths. They're basically just a box of garage cloths that I like to use when I'm cleaning. That way they're just disposable. All right, now that everything is cleaned with Simple Green, sometimes it will leave behind a little bit of a residue. So I always like to go back and do a rinse cycle. I just have water in this spray bottle and I'll do one last wipe down before we move on to sanding. All right, next up, time to scuff sand. So I said I was going to scuff sand, but I think I'm going to kind of do a little bit of both back and forth. So on the drawers that I have that are completely flat and don't have this curved sort of applique on it, I am going to be sanding these all the way back to the raw wood, basically getting rid of all of the finish. I want to try and save this wood, but some of it is just failing a little bit, so I'm just going to start fresh by going ahead and sanding all of that off. When I am doing that, I'm going to be very, very careful because these drawers are veneer, and when you're working with a veneer, it's a lot of the times very thin, and if you burn through the veneer or basically sand too far into the veneer, then that is going to cause you to have to make repairs that you may not want to or even know how to make, and it's going to pretty much cause you not to be able to utilize the wood veneer, and you might have to paint instead. So with that being said, while normally with a finish that I'm trying to remove that's not a veneer, I would use about an 80 grit sandpaper like I did on the chairs because those were solid wood, the ones that I did last week. But with this one, since it's such a thin veneer, I'm gonna go up to 180 grit sandpaper, which is gonna be a lot finer and a lot less grittier, but it's going to allow me to be way more careful when I am sanding the veneer. So I just wanted to stop really quick and look at the difference between the part that I have not sanded and then the part that I have sanded. You can tell a difference where this still has the old finish on it and it's still kind of peeling up. It is a lot darker and a deeper brown, and this is where we will get to when I go ahead and sand this off. I'm just going very slowly, like I said, with just 180 grit, and I have not blown through the veneer just yet. So we are going to hope and pray that I continue on this streak of not busting through the veneer. So as you can see, the wood grain on these drawers is just impeccable, which is why I want to keep some of the wood grain elements. So I am loving how that turned out. Next, I'm gonna do the 3 middle drawers in the bigger dresser right over there, and I'm gonna sand those back just the same as these guys. All right, these came out just as great as the other drawers. I'm so glad that I just took my time and didn't bust through any of the veneer so that my design plan can still be carried out. Now, here is where we kind of get into you could do this, but you could do that, and that's just the joy of furniture flipping, because there's really no right or wrong answer with the design choices that you go with on your furniture that you are flipping. So with that being said, there's a couple of different routes that we could go with these drawers. Again, this wood grain in the middle is super, super unique, just like the middle drawers and the top 2 drawers over here. So my plan right now is to try and sand this down as well as I can, see how easy or hard it is, and see if I want to go ahead and do that on the remaining 9 drawers. If it works out, then I would also like to leave this middle section the same as these, and then we will paint these outer sections. If it doesn't work out in the middle and I just don't feel like doing it all the way, then I can just go ahead and paint the remainder of the drawer. So I am going to be using the same method with 180 grit sandpaper on my surf prep here. Now this is going to fit inside of my drawer to an extent. It'll get in there, but then when we get down here, it's no longer going to fit in these corners. So that will be where I need to just grab out some sandpaper and go ahead and hand sand myself. So we'll see how I like it. I think it's going to look really good if that works out. So let's get to it. So just as I suspected, my sander wouldn't fit into the corners, but this middle portion really wasn't hard to sand through. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna be taking my little finger sander, and I will link it down below. It is really handy when you have littler areas that need to be sanded, but your sander won't really get there and you don't really wanna like fold up any sandpaper and get in those nooks and crannies. This will just really allow me to get the rest of that finish off. And as I go, I will just be switching out this little sandpaper. It actually comes with several of them in the package, so I can switch them out. So we've got an 80 grit, a 120 grit, and then I believe there's also a 220 grit that comes in the pack. But I'll be going a little bit more coarse again because we're removing the finish, and because I'm hand sanding, I don't really have to worry about blowing through the veneer because there's not as much pressure in my hand than there is in like an electric sander. So as I'm sitting here racking my brain trying to figure out a better way than using this on these little areas, I remembered that my multi-tool has multiple attachments, and I remembered that it had some sandpaper and like a little triangle for getting into smaller areas. Now, I will say it doesn't quite fit into the smallest area, but it gets a lot more of the stain off than just my other sander did, and then I don't have to use this as much. So I just have 120 grit sandpaper on here, and then I can still sand back a little bit of this area Nice and lightly, again, not busting through the veneer. So now that I've got the sanding to the raw wood all finished, I'm gonna switch over to some scuff sanding. And scuff sanding means that I'm just going to roughen up the surface, smooth anything out that, you know, any like superficial scratches, but the goal is to just give the surface a little bit of tooth. I'm gonna be especially focusing on the tops of these dressers because they are laminate or Formica, they are more of like a plasticky material, and I can tell that because of the shine that they show. So I am going to work and get all of that shine off, and that way it won't be so slick, so my paint and primer can really adhere to the surface really nicely. I'm gonna be sticking with my 180 grit. I'm just not gonna be going through the finish. I am only gonna be just roughening it up, like I said. So I'm having a little bit of a hard time finding out or figuring out how to get into this little itty bitty corner. I have all of the middle part sanded except these little crevices. And so what I've done is I've taken my detail sander. I kind of have been using these on a lot of projects lately, so definitely a great tool to have in your arsenal. But I've just got the smallest angle and I've got my 220 grit sandpaper around it, and I am just sanding. Yes, it's very tedious, but if that darker spot is there, it is really going to bother me, and I will know it's there. So I am doing this for my sake, and then also I just think it'll look that much better for the look I am shooting for. So I'm gonna be detail sanding for a while, and then we'll be able to move on. So as much as it is important to do prep work, it is not really my favorite thing. So let's just say I am glad that that is done. We've got everything scuff sanded, and we've got the drawers all sanded down to the raw wood. So now it's time for some fun. We are gonna do a paint wash on the drawers and on like the insides of the drawers that I sanded ever so long of my life. It took probably maybe like 3 to 4 hours for just sanding those down. So lots of time, but that's okay. We're moving on. To do a paint wash, it's important to have a color, like a lighter tan color, if you wanna sort of just neutralize the veneer that is on here. If I were to just go ahead and top coat it as is, this would darken a lot, and it would actually sort of end up the color that it was to begin with. And so I want to neutralize the sort of orangey and brownness that will come if I just top coated it. And I'm gonna do that by doing a paint wash with some tan paint that is watered down to almost act like a stain. So I'm gonna be using the color Sandbar from Dixie Belle. And this is just one of my go-to paint wash colors, honestly. You'll find that you have a few colors that just do really well with the paint wash. And I do not mix this by any means with like a measuring cup. I just basically eyeball it, and I'll maybe do like 50-50 water to paint. So I've got my paint in there, and then now I will go ahead and put my water in there. The more water you use to dilute it, the obviously less concentrated it will be, so it will be less pigmented with that. And then I'm just gonna stir them all together so it'll basically just be one even consistency across the board. The next thing that you'll need is just a microfiber cloth and a paintbrush, and you'll just be dipping your paintbrush into your 50-50 mix of paint to water and brushing it on your surface. You want to do just nice even strokes across your little area. And then you'll take your lint-free cloth and you'll wipe it back. Again, you want to go across with the wood grain so that just in case anything dries to where you can see any marks, then it will just be in the same direction the whole time. So now it's much more neutralized, and when I put my top coat on it, nothing should change very much. I'm gonna go ahead and do that on all of the drawers that I've got here, and then we'll also again be doing it in the middle areas as well to just keep everything consistent. I'm now going to apply the same paint wash to the base of each dresser on the legs so that the same color can kind of pull through. All right, I went ahead and taped off the insides. That took a while, but we got it all done, and I just took a little paring knife type thing and cut along the edges where I didn't need the tape, and that's how I got it to curve like that. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take some plastic with the tape already on it, and I'm going to wrap my drawers because I'm planning on spraying the primer, and I don't want to get the paint or the primer inside of the drawers or on the sides of the drawers or on the bottom of the drawer to gunk anything up. So this will really help me protect the areas that I don't want to get any paint. All right, it's time to prime. I am a little nervous about the weather. It is super humid, but I am impatient, and so I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna be priming with the Kills, which blocks stains, and I am a little worried about some bleed through because I'm gonna go with a lighter color, and I sort of broke through the finish on a few of the areas. So just to block it all in, I'm gonna use this, and then it also is a bonding primer, so it'll help my paint adhere well to the surface because it is still a little bit slick, and so this will do both jobs. It is an oil-based primer, so that is something to keep just keep in mind when you're using this. So that means that it doesn't mix with water-based products, but once it's dry, it's okay to then use a water-based paint on top. We are going to go ahead and prime. I do have my respirator mask that I'm going to wear because this just is gonna have a lot of the paint particles flying in the air. I've also protected my driveway area so that none of the paint gets on the driveway. And I'm just gonna go to town on all 9 of these drawers. Got myself a little assembly line, so we're gonna go for it. And it's raining. Inside we go. All right, now that we've got the rain out of the way, it's the next day, so it's time to prime. Let's try this again. Hopefully it doesn't start raining again. My primer is dry. So now that it's dry, with the spray primer, sometimes it gets just a little bit of texture when it dries on the pieces, and I don't really like that texture in my finish. So what I like to do is just grab my Ryobi sander, because it is, well, I gotta grab a battery, because it is just easy to bring outside out here, not have any plug-in. And then I have a foam abrasive sander, because it's not gonna be as like coarse or as abrasive, I guess is the word, as like a sandpaper without the sponge. It's just a lot softer, and that's going to help me not eliminate any of the primer, but just eliminate the actual texture. Okay, got my battery, put that in, mask on, because there's no dust extractor. And sometimes the bag falls off. I know it's something that you guys aren't able to see, but it truly makes a difference, especially in that end result of the really, really smooth finish. Just taking that extra few minutes to sand in between coats of primer and paint will just upscale your furniture that much more. I've got the other dresser to do, and then I'm also going to do the drawers that I primed so that we can get ready for some paint. All right, I am ready for some paint. So I am actually going to be whipping out my Home Right Super Finish Max sprayer. I've got several sprayers just because this is what I do all the time, and so I like to sometimes switch things up, just use some different tools, kind of share my thoughts with you guys. So I did put a liner in this cup because I just figured why not. I had them on hand and figured it's easier cleanup. I'm still gonna use a strainer like always. And then today I'm gonna be using Endless Shore. It is a silk paint by Dixie Belle, and it is like an off-white creamy color, but it's not too creamy to where it's like yellow. That's pretty much what I'm going for. I wanted it to go well with the whitewashed wood that is on the drawers, and so I think this is gonna be the perfect color. I'm gonna just dump this all in because I know I'm gonna end up using all of it, whether that be in my first coat or my second coat. It's all gonna get on the pieces. And then since I've used silk paint several times in my spray gun, I know that I like to dilute it just with a small amount of water for the whole container. And this just thins it out a little bit and helps it go through the sprayer really, really nicely. Okay, now that we're all strained, I'm going to put this on. All right, and we're ready. All right, I am going to test out my spray pattern as always before I move into spraying the actual piece. So I've got my cardboard here, and I'll test out some different settings, make sure everything's flowing well, and then we'll move on and spray both pieces. Okay, it's looking good. Here we go. All right, it is time for coat number 2. I've let this dry for a few hours, And then I couldn't help myself to come back out here this evening. It is about like 8 o'clock at night and we're losing some sun, but that's okay because the weather is actually the nicest it's been all day as far as humidity goes. So I'm like, I gotta paint, I gotta do it. My itch cannot be scratched unless I paint. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a second coat. I already went ahead and sanded down the first coat just to, again, get all that texture knocked back. And so coat number 2 can go on really nice and smooth. I got a little excited about the hardware, so I forgot to get a little before clip of it, but you saw it at least on the befores of the dressers. Now it is time to clean up the hardware. So sometimes I can take some chemicals or some cleaners and revitalize the brass hardware that is on mid-century modern furniture. Sometimes it's not real brass and so it doesn't come clean, but this time I'm pretty sure it's real brass, so I'm excited to clean it up. What I did first was I took this bucket, well, this pan that I had pot that I'd gotten from Goodwill, and I put it outside on my grill that has a side burner, and I put some water and I put some vinegar in there and I boiled it for about 15 minutes. Definitely recommend doing it outdoors if you have the option because it does have a very strong smell after all your boiling vinegar. But after you're done boiling the vinegar, I just kind of rinsed it. And now I've got my Barkeeper's Friend. This is a cleaner that is going to help shine up the pieces here. And then also I've got my steel wool, which is really going to give it the touch it needs to look more of a like brassy, bronzy color as opposed to the dingy, patinaed hardware it is right now. So that is what it's gonna look like as opposed to, I mean, you can even tell a difference from when I just boiled it. It's gonna be a lot brighter, lighter. So this one is the one that I've cleaned. This one is the one that hasn't been cleaned yet, but still has just been soaked in the vinegar. So you can still tell a difference of just that finishing touch that the Barkeeper's Friend and the steel wool does versus just being boiled in vinegar. Now that the hardware is all clean, it is time to basically just put these pieces back together. I have a couple of more steps, so I'm gonna go ahead and first rip off the tape that I spent so much time taping to just cover up this wood area. So I'm really hoping that it paid off and that I like the final look. And if we have to make any touch-ups, we will, but here goes nothing. That was so satisfying and it all came off in one piece and oh my gosh, I love it. Oh, this looks really good. I absolutely love it. It's time to put everything back together and show you the final reveal. All right, you guys, the pieces are finished. I am absolutely in love with these pieces. I am not typically a light neutral person. I have probably never really done a look like this before because I like a little bit of color. I like some moodiness and earth tones, but this set, my vision literally came to life. So if you're over on Instagram and you guys helped me figure out what in the world to do with this set, thank you so much for encouraging me to try and sand down the middles of those drawers. It definitely was not a job for the faint of heart. So I stuck with it though, and I am just loving the results that came of it. The paint wash really helped with this set because if I wouldn't have paint washed it, it would have been too warm of a brown, and so I needed to cool it down a little bit and make it just a little bit less stark brown. So I am just absolutely loving it. I'm so glad I got to keep the hardware and in its natural state again. Really quick, I wanted to talk about just a little bit of a breakdown of the pricing of everything that I used to flip this set. So of course, like I told you at the beginning, I definitely overpaid for these compared to what I normally try and get my pieces for. Typically for 2 pieces, I try maybe 150, but I like to get it as low as possible. I paid $295 for this set. So already we're in at a pretty high price, but then if you factor in the cleaning supplies like the simple green, the barkeeper's friend, the sandpaper, the tape, because I almost use an entire roll, we'll give that all about $25 for the miscellaneous things. And then another $25 for primer because for some reason this spray primer is just going up and up and up in price. And I used 2 cans of it, so that's about $12 per can. And then of course the paint, both the paint wash and the silk paint that I utilized, that was about $25 in materials there. So $75 in materials, $295. We're in at a total of $370. And I'm gonna try and list this set on Facebook Marketplace for maybe like $800 to $850. So we'll still get a pretty decent profit of maybe around $500, maybe a tad bit less. So excited to see how people receive it. All right, guys, we've got people on the way to come and pick up this set. So what the story is, I listed on Facebook Marketplace around 5:30 one night, and I had a message in my inbox around 11. And then the next morning I responded and they're on their way. I did list it at $900 because I wanted just a little bit of wiggle room. I told you guys that I was thinking $800 to $850, so she did actually ask for $800, but I said $850 and it's yours. I had it still listed and I've only had a couple other hits on it. It is a little bit of a higher price, so that kind of makes sense to me. And so sometimes I just take the first hit, even if it does go a little bit lower than what I had it listed at, but that's why I kind of listed it higher, so I knew I had that wiggle room from what my initial thought was for getting for this set. So I'm super excited. I will be getting a profit of $480 again because of the huge buy-in at the beginning and then the $75 worth of products, but that's okay. $480 is still not a bad profit at the end of the day. So excited that this set sold. It's been a while since I've kind of sold much. We've been doing a lot of furniture for ourselves, so here we go. So be sure and go follow us over on Instagram. That is where we kind of update everyone on the selling of our pieces. If it doesn't sell within each video, we do profit breakdowns over there and everything. So at Furniture Flipping Teacher, and there's tons of behind the scenes on the stories and just more awesome furniture content. We would love to have you over there in that community too. Thank you guys so much for watching. Get subscribed down below because I've got another awesome project for you guys next week, and I'll see you on the flip side.